State Senator Angela Williams of Denver is the latest Democrat to get into the primary to challenge Senator Cory Gardner. So, dozen Democrats and counting now. Senator Williams, what do you feel like you and you alone can offer Democratic primary voters?
Well, you know, what I feel like I can offer Democratic primary voters is that, number one, I am the only sitting legislator that is in the race at this time. I am able to look at my 9 years of being at the Colorado State Legislature and being focused on getting policies passed, complex issues, bringing people together, bringing together businesses and labor to solve the issues for Colorado.
Is being a sitting politician these days an advantage or a disadvantage?
Well, I think it is an advantage because it is recent dealing with the issues, being there in the legislature, and being able to govern and show that you can be there and you can get the issues done for the people of Colorado.
Primary voters are going to want to hear how you will articulate the case against Senator Gardner. What, simply put, is the case against his reelection?
I think the case that it is put is that Cory Gardner is not representing the values of Coloradans. That's it. We're not representing working families. He's not necessarily standing up for farmers and ranchers who contribute to our economy here in Colorado and protecting the environment. And I think that's going to be important, that we have someone who will represent the people of Colorado, get things done, and not represent special interests.
For folks outside of Denver who might not be particularly familiar with your legislative record over the years, where do you kind of see yourself in the spectrum of the Democratic Party? Because you got the Democratic Socialists like Bernie Sanders, you've got self-proclaimed centrists like former Governor Hickenlooper. Where do you see yourself there?
Where I see myself at in the spectrum is that I have been focused on the policy. I am a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat, but as I've been in the legislature, I've worked to pass policies based on what the needs are for the people of Colorado.
You see yourself as a progressive?
I have worked on progressive issues, just like you look at family medical leave, you look at equal pay for equal work, you look at raising the minimum wage. And so, yes, while I have experience as a former small business owner, and I think small businesses are important, I have represented and I'll continue to fight for progressive issues.
So primaries are one place where people in parties kind of figure out where the party is, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, where they want to go in the future. What do you see as a big issue these days in your party?
One of the biggest issues I see in our party is that we've got to make sure that we're being a voice for all in our state and across the country. I think it's going to be important that we're listening to those constituencies, those that don't have a voice, the underserved, people of color that we've not necessarily been strong on. That's are going to be the biggest issues for us.
It seems like the National Democratic Party is reorienting itself strongly in that direction. Do you think the state party is what lags there?
You know, I think the state party is following the national trend, and I think the state Democratic Party is doing a good job at following that trend. It's important that we have voices from all constituencies that are represented in our democracy.
Mitch McConnell runs the Senate. Former Governor Hickenlooper said that his obstruction of President Obama was treasonous. I mean, that's a word. Do you agree?
I agree. I agree that Mitch McConnell got in the way of a lot of the policies that President Obama, particularly if you look at the Affordable Care Act and making sure that everyone in our country has access to affordable health care. I think that some of the policies and the processes that we've seen with the nomination of our Supreme Court Justice, yes.
You think the word treasonous applies?
Yes.
Okay. Colorado has been a leader on women's rights going back a century, going back 50 years, yet the state has never elected a woman senator or governor. Why do you suppose that is?
I believe that as we look across the country and how our landscape is changing, we in Colorado have been very forthcoming about having women's voices. There's been a movement across the country. Here in Colorado, we've trained, we have Emily's List. It's just a matter of who has been running the country and what are the voices that have been at the table for so long. And we're seeing, sweeping changes across the country, and Colorado is doing a fabulous job at ensuring that women are running for office. You know, a woman has to be asked twice to run sometime, or just asked at all. But I think with all the support and the changing across the country, that we will see a woman elected to higher offices in the state. Look at those who ran for governor, you know, Cory Kennedy. We're running, and we will continue to get the traction that we need to make sure women's voices are at the table.
If Senator Gardner follows President Trump's playbook, he is going to call his opponent a socialist. How will you respond if Cory Gardner calls you a socialist?
If Cory Gardner calls me a socialist, what I will reflect back on is the policies that he supported and those policies that represent the people of Colorado. And that, to me, that's what it's about.
Former Governor Hickenlooper has said that he does not want to run for the Senate and that he probably wouldn't be very good at the job. That said, if he decides that he wants to get into this primary, would you leave and clear space for him?
I will not.
Why is that?
I believe that everyone has a right to their aspirations, and that I am a candidate that is qualified to run, and I will run against John Hickenlooper if he stays in the race.
I remember the first candidate in this primary that I asked that question of, Mike Johnson. He said, well, I like Hickenlooper a lot. We'd have to have a conversation about it. So let me ask you this. Is it insulting that I ask you and other candidates that question, or is that just politics?
No, I don't think that it's insulting. Everyone has a right to their aspirations. There's been a lot of talk on a national level about, you know, John Hickenlooper getting in the race. But that's John's decision. That's not for us to determine what his goals, and him and his family will determine what his goals and his aspirations are.
I imagine, though, if he were to get into this race, that the two of you would sound a lot of similar themes in terms of finding workable relationships, bringing people together, looking for common sense solutions. I hear echoes, certainly not always the same issues in the same manner. How would you distinguish yourself from him?
I think I would distinguish myself from him as being, number one, a woman in the race. I think that I'm a qualified African-American woman in the race, and I believe that I have fought on for constituencies like the underserved, communities of color, small businesses, and I think we'd have to differentiate ourselves on those policies.
This past session in the state legislature, you sponsored a repeal of the death penalty. But while that bill was struggling and eventually dying in the state legislature, you were not present. You were meeting with political groups about getting into this race. Did you put your personal political goals over the promise that you made to try and deliver that death penalty repeal?
Absolutely not. The repeal of the death penalty was introduced the first week in March, and it was still early in the times that you were referring to, and there would have been no decisions or no conversations about the death penalty without me being present, because I was a prime sponsor of that piece of legislation.
In the end, that bill did not advance. One of the concerns was whether State Senator Rhonda Fields, who has a personal tragedy that informs her view on that topic, whether she was brought into the process. Did you learn anything in terms of the way that you conduct legislative business based on the failure of that repeal?
I think that the repeal of the death penalty is a tough policy for us to pass, and clearly this is like the fourth or fifth time we have introduced it, but we also have some different circumstances. Other states and red states around the country are repealing the death penalty. It's a barbaric piece of a policy that it is unequal the way it is applied. It was my first time running that, and there are some lessons learned, but I do not change my views on we need to repeal the death penalty in Colorado.
I'm appreciative of your time. A couple quick questions and quick answers to give folks where you stand on some big issues that are talked about quite a bit. Do you support the idea of Medicare for all as proposed by Senator Sanders, among others?
You know, I know that we need to have a conversation in Washington about how we provide. I think that we need to look at if Medicare for all is the best solution for the people of our country.
Would you lean more towards the idea of improving on the Affordable Care Act, on Obamacare, before you would look to universal single payer?
I would probably look at improving the Affordable Care Act before moving on.
Okay. Do you support the Green New Deal as it's currently proposed by progressives in Congress?
You know, the Green New Deal has a lot of good points to it. I believe there's some other things that we do need to work on, but the main point of it is how do we protect our environment, and how do we protect people around the country with changing climate. You know, it's been predicted by the expert in 12 years. We need to fix this, and so I look at the Green New Deal, and I think there are some good points in the policy, and I think there's some policies that need to be worked on.
Do you give Republicans any credit for passing the First Step Act, the bipartisan criminal justice reform?
I do not give them any credit for passing that. I do appreciate Democrats and Senator Cory Booker, taking what it needs to navigate through the political system to get that piece of policy passed.
I mean, they couldn't have passed it without Republicans, but you don't give Republicans any credit for it?
Well, they voted for it. Did they think that was the right thing to do? You know, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in negotiating legislation, but I won't give them credit for taking the lead and realizing it needs to happen for the right reasons.
Colorado Senator Michael Bennet was one of the few Democrats running for president who does not support the idea of decriminalizing border crossings. Do you support the idea of decriminalizing border crossings?
That's a policy that I will have to research further. You know, it's going to be a long campaign, Kyle, and I hope you'll have me back so we can dive into more policies.
That is fair enough. One last question on a very different note. Senator Gardner said last week that the best barbecue in America is not Carolina style or Texas or Memphis rub or Kansas City, but it's Colorado barbecue. Do you know what he's talking about?
I have no clue what Senator Cory Gardner is talking about. If you recall, I tweeted you and said, you know what, maybe we need to take a trip down to the south and have some Memphis or Kansas City barbecue, so he really understands what good barbecue is about.
Let the record show we spent less than 30 seconds talking about barbecue. Appreciate you coming by to share your views. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you.
Subscribe to the Next YouTube channel for the best of Next and some other stuff.